people have ever done split turning? Okay, it's a lot of fun when you get to do it. It's just two pieces of wood with a piece of paper in between, glue it, wait 24 hours, and then turn it, and if you're lucky, it doesn't fly apart. One of the things, or some of the things you can do with split turning, should have had all this stuff laid out. Some of the things that you can do with split turning are making duplicates of something that if you wanted to put a turning on either side of a mirror, you could use something like this. This is a paper joint, and basically I just glued two sticks together. And then I split them, so I end up with two. I'm going to use this camera. So you end up with two that are perfectly identical. So if you put them on either side of a mirror, they're identical, and you don't have to worry about making this one match this one because they are identical because you turned them at the same time. Right? So that's one of the joys of doing split turning, is you're able to make some things. Another thing that I've used for split turning was making Christmas ornaments and things for kids to make their own Christmas ornaments. So you do a turning with paper joint in between and turn little bells. I don't know if you can see that one very good on the camera, but I can pass that around. Basically, again, you take a piece of wood. This would be two pieces of wood glued together with a paper joint. You split it, and then you take the two different kinds, put them together, and you end up with a body shape, and you can put a little head on it. I made nativity scenes with this technique, where you make big ones for Joseph, smaller ones for different people, and you can make the kings. You can put little hands on them, and whatever embellishment you want. And that's just with paper joints. So I made a bunch of those when I was in Calgary, when there was a bunch of kids wanted to do some Christmas cards. So I probably made 10 or 15 sticks and turned a whole bunch of bells on the sticks. And then I cut the bells and then split them and just gave them to the kids. And they were able to we made little snowmen, little Christmas trees, little bells, and the kids could just create whatever kind of image they wanted. And then they glued it on a piece of cardboard or a piece of paper or a piece of wood, and that was their Christmas ornament for that year. So it was a blast. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it. Then I started last year. I made a few femespheres. This is a femesphere. I didn't bring a piece of wood, but if you roll these things, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the floor. But if you roll it, it'll roll straight. It's supposed to roll straight. But just because I wanted to roll. Yeah. But the object is that it's two spheres. You turn it as two coves, then you split the paper joint and then turn it 90 degrees and glue it back together. With a little bit of luck, that's what I'll end up with tonight. So, in order to get ready, I started with two pieces of wood, and I put a paper joint in between. And then just to make it easier for me to figure out, because this piece of wood had a big chunk of fault in it, but I thought, well, I could still use that because that's going to get turned away. And so I took a felt pen and I kind of drew the shape that I'm going to end up with. And once you got the shape, that helped me picture what I was going to end up with, so I could move it back and forth and kind of figure out how I was going to make it. The size of a femesphere is determined by how small you turn this round. It doesn't matter how big the wood is. Once you put it in the chuck and turn it round, you turn it, keep turning it until you have a cylinder. And that's what limits how big it is. You can make it smaller just by making the circle smaller. When you're prepping a block, you want to make sure that you flatten the sides. I glued these together and they weren't perfectly lined up, so I ran them through my bandsaw just to give it a flat spot, and the same on this side. And because it's a paper joint and you're wanting to put your center right on the center of the wood, if you have a spike like this, it's like a little wedge, and if you just push it in there, chances are it'll split the paper joint. So you drill a hole you drill a little tiny hole in the end on both sides, and that way when you put it on your live center, especially on the live center, the one-way live centers, they don't the point doesn't retract, it's fixed. So if you don't have something for the point to dig into, it might split the block.
Well, Bert, people that have those one-way live centers can tap out the point as well and just use the circle.
They can, however, they have to make sure, how do they get it on the center line is the challenge, is to get it on the center line. I don't know if we have a number 3 to number 2.
We do.
We do?
Somewhere.
Well, anyway, I guess for one of the things I wanted to show is that, I don't know if this camera shows it really that well. Maybe this one might show better. I thought I did one of these where I didn't drill it. This one here. There. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little better than 1/8 of an inch of gap there, where the point is pushing on the wood. And the challenge can be is sometimes you push this in. Well, this one, fortunately, it didn't break it. It actually pushed the point in, and then the ring grabs. The ring actually grabs both pieces of the wood, so it won't split apart. So if you drill a little recess in there first, chances are it won't split apart when you're turning it. I like to use the step centers because they're spring loaded, so that it has less risk of popping the two pieces of wood apart. I also have a step center, live center on my lathe that's Morris taper 2, so I can just, it's the same, it's spring loaded, so it doesn't have a chance to pop that apart. So
it should be on the top drawer.
I think we'll be okay. This it didn't break, so we'll try it. And if it does break, that's part of the demonstration. I was actually hoping one of them would come apart. I thought I'd left one where I didn't drill it because I was physically going to crank it in until it did break, because it happens. So again, to get started, it's a simple matter of getting 2 pieces of wood. A piece of wood there and a piece of wood here. Doesn't matter what kind of glue you use, because it's only going to be on there for the length of time you're turning it. And the easiest way I found to make these is to put glue on one side and then just run these two together and get a really nice good covering of glue on both surfaces. And then as you squeeze it together, you'll feel it kind of stick up, which is typical for glue. The most important thing about making a Femesphere is don't forget to put the paper in. And don't ask me how I know that. I made one once and I tried to split it, and I was wondering why it was so damned hard to split. And I realized I forgot to put the paper in.
First, do you want to comment on what kind of paper you're using?
This is just a piece of bag, grocery bag. It can be just brown craft paper. It can be computer paper. The only paper that isn't recommended is the glossy type. Like if it's a magazine that has a glossy ink, sometimes it doesn't stick as good, so they'll come apart. I used to use newspaper, and the challenge was when you make them out of newspaper, you know you got it right if you can read both sides. You know, when you split it apart, you should be able to read both sides of the newspaper. And like I say, the most important part is make sure the paper gets in. And it doesn't take a lot of pressure. These PVA glues, once you've rubbed it together and they start to tack a little bit, you put a rubber band on it so it doesn't move, and 24 hours later that's going to be lots strong enough to hold it together for turning. So any questions on that? Okay. I guess to get to the turning point is you mount it in the lathe. And you make sure that it clears all the corners before you turn the lathe on. I was going to wear my smock, but I think it's too warm. Tools. When I'm making the Femespheres, I generally just use 3 tools, sometimes only 1. First tool I use, spindle roughing gouge, and that's basically just to get the block round. Once it's round, I'll use a spindle gouge, and this is what I'll use to cut the coves on. And then for defining the ends of the Femisphere, when we get to that point, use a parting tool. So roughing gouge, spindle gouge, and a parting tool is the only tools we actually need to make these. And you could do the whole works with a spindle gouge. You really could. You could do the whole thing with a spindle gouge. One of the little aids that I use when I start turning it, in order to get the cove, you turn one cove, and turning the first cove is easy. You turn whatever shape it is. The challenge is to do exactly the same on the other side. And I was talking with a few folks here a couple days ago, and they're talking about left-hand and right-hand turning, and how when they turned a series of beads doing it one way, and then when they tried to turn the other half of the bead, they had difficulty getting it to look the same. And my comment was, which cove did you turn first? Your dominant side or your non-dominant side? And the guys were saying, oh, well, I turned right-handed, so I did the right-hand one first. And so the left-hand one's really hard to do because you're trying to match something. You're using your non-dominant side, so your muscles are all crazy. They don't know what the hell's going on. And you're trying to match something that's already there. So I suggested, well, do your non-dominant side first. And they were like, well, why is that? I said, well, you just make it, your non-dominant side makes a shape. When you go to do the other side, you're using your dominant side, which you're really comfortable with, and you can duplicate anything with your comfortable side. So sometimes it pays to do a little pre-planning that way, just to kind of think of what's going to happen. Alrighty, so without further ado, let's make this thing round. Turn this on. And another thing with this diameter of project, because it's only about 2 or 3 inches, speed is your friend when you're cutting a lot of air. So you're going make it go as fast as you're comfortable with, but it's probably make it go a little faster than you're normally comfortable with, because speed is your friend when you're cutting air. And also try and stand out of the line of fire. If this was to come apart, it'll fly that way and this way. So I usually stand on this side to get it round. One thing to cool, pick up the top. That round yet, but I'd like to stop and take a look and just see where things are at. And I'll move this in a little closer and raise it up just a little. Can you hear that little bit of bumpiness? And if I go on this side, it's really quiet. So that's a quick way of telling whether it's getting close to being round. That's basically it for the roughing gouge. Now we can find out how big the Femesphere is going to be. So I take a set of calipers. So that's about as big as it's going to be. When I'm looking at the split here, I can see there's a bit of a imperfection in here that might show up as a fault on the end of the Femesphere, but I think we'll just that will present a problem. I'm just going to make this one a little smaller. That's a little better. You might still have a bit of a problem, but that like I say, the diameter that you make the cylinder is what determines how big your Femespheres can be. So you can make them as big or as small as you like. Once you have this dimension, you turn your caliper sideways. Sure, I got 14 pencils in my shop, and I forgot to bring one with me. So I lay this on here roughly where I think it's going to fit, and I'll mark there, there. That's going to be the Femesphere. That's the so I'm going to turn the coves inside of that. Next thing to do is to find center. So this one here is, it's about 54 millimeters in diameter. So 54 millimeters divided by 2 is what, 27? So I'll put a mark at 27. So that's going to be the center of this Femesphere. And now we want to decide how wide are the wings on the Femesphere. The one I passed around is about 5 millimeters or whatever the width. So you decide how wide you want that on here, and it doesn't have to be a measurement. You can just put a pencil mark on here and a pencil mark on the other side. And that's going to be the width of the coves. So now that I know that dimension, I will run my calipers down, and I can set these calipers when I quit cutting the coves too to get it accurate. I'll set the calipers right on that measurement, so that when I cut away the waste wood, I'll be able to make the waste wood spindle the same diameter as this. And that's really important, because what's left here has to match this, because when you turn it 90 degrees, if you don't have it that way, you have a lot of sanding to do. Okay? So now, basically, I'm just going to move this a little closer, and I'll waste a lot of this wood away and waste a lot of this wood away, get it down to about 3/4 of an inch or whatever, just to get it out of the way, and then I'll start doing the cove. And I'll waste the wood away with a parting tool. When I'm doing the coves, I'm more comfortable doing the right-hand side, so I'm purposely going to do the left-hand side. But I've got to the point now where I switch hands all the time, so it doesn't really matter. I'm right-handed for most things, but I'm left-handed in some things. I play hockey left-handed, and I shoot basketball right-handed. And I would turn, I don't care, because when I teach the kids at school, I say the steel doesn't know which way it's going, the wood doesn't care, and if you use your body, then your hands don't care. So I anchor the tool, I have my elbows into my body, I raise the tool until it's cutting wood and turn it, and then I swing my whole body. So whether I'm holding it this way, or whether I'm holding it this way, there's no hands involved. It's your body that's doing the curve. Anchor the tool, ride the boulder, pick up the cut, and swing your body. So usually about this point now, I've got a cove, and the cove kind of looks kind of nice. It's kind of a fair curve. There's no flat spots. There's no bumps on it. But I really don't know if that's the cove I'm going to end up with. So I make little circles of different things. And I even 3D printed some of these things here for as an aid to making these coves. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera. Hopefully you will. When I lay this on here, can you see that, John? Okay, so you'll be able to see that this cove matches, this diameter cove matches what I've got there. So I know I'm in the ballpark. I'm going to keep coving this out until I get to the line that I want to stop at, and try and maintain the same shape all the way down. And I'll keep checking. Once I'm satisfied that I'm going down deep enough and I'm at the end of one side, that's the size I'm going to go for on the opposite side. Once I know this one, I use a template, do the same on this side. Should fit. Fingers crossed. Now that I've got this side fairly close to what I want it to be, I don't want to take that diameter down to this diameter right now, because I need that much wood to help dry while I'm taking all the wood off the other side. Whoop! Uh-oh, I screwed up. I screwed up by having the catch, so the end result is my femesphere will be slightly smaller than what I started with. So this one here doesn't look quite like this one. I have to take a little more off the end. But I've got most of the material is gone here now, so I can take these ends down to the size that I need to match this size down here. But because I made it a little bit smaller, I need to reestablish how long this thing is going to be. And some people say, well, I made a mistake and it made it smaller. I say, well, no, I didn't make a mistake. The wood just told me it wasn't happy, it didn't want to be there. So we got rid of it. Now it's happy. So now, because I've already determined where the center is, I kind of got to eyeball where center is on here and make sure that when I take this down to the small diameter, that it goes past that point. So it can be down to the small diameter past this way, but you want to maintain this curve and this curve to be the same, if that makes any sense. You might be able to see what I'm referring to when I get a little closer.
Remember to measure your small diameter.
Yes, thank you. So now I'll set the calipers so that I can set the small diameter. So I just mark the maximum length so that I know where I'm going to turn down to. Now I'm going to go outside of that and make the diameter smaller. One thing to note, when you use these calipers for doing something like this, when you buy them, they're fairly sharp. The first thing you do is take a file and blunt them, even make them round, like even hone them so that they're a bit round. because all you're wanting to do is run the round part on the wood. If it's really, really sharp, it might grab the wood and tear it apart. And now that I've got my diameter that I want to target to, and I know the length that I need to go to, I'm going to take the length down all the way across, and then I'm just going to keep blending both of these curves until they look the same and they end up at that minor diameter. So that looks pretty good. And I don't really care what the number is. This one just, it happens to be 50 millimeter, but it doesn't really matter what the number is. As long as the cove that I have here now, I can look and see how it fits. It may not fit absolutely perfect on the cove, but when you put the template on here, you can kind of see where there's a gap and if there's not a gap. And so when you check it on this side, you just try and make it look the same. And you can make femespheres with beads on here, bumps, extra coves. The challenge is that whatever you do on one side, you got to do the same thing on the other side. So it's just good practice to get used to using a template with coves till you get comfortable, and then you can make a template of some exotic shape and it'll still work. But you have to be really, really careful that you cut it to your template. I've tried making a few of them with exotic things on here, and I gave up on it because it was just, for me, I got a short attention span. I wasn't successful, so I just threw it away. They burn really nice. I don't know if you can notice it when I'm actually cutting, though. I'm not using my arms or my hands. I've got the handle into my body, and I'm actually moving my body, and all I'm doing with my hands is turning the tool open or closed on the flute, and that controls the cut. So once it's cutting, riding the bevel, you can open the tool up a little bit and it'll cut a little more, and then you can take off the part you want, and then you close the tool a little bit so it quits cutting, and you can control the cut so you can take like angel hair off. And that's looking, this one here fits the template really good. This one here is a bit fat on the top. So I got to take just a little bit more on the top here and blend it so that so this will fit. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not too bad. Basically, the turning, you could sand it now. If you would, if I was to finish this, I would go ahead and sand this up nice and smooth. Wouldn't sand it too crazily. I would just, you know, this is actually cut not too bad. But
Embarrassing if I missed that one. Getting good practice.
I'll see if I can crank another one out here. How much time we got? We got lots of time? I'm hoping I brought a knife with me.
Sand it down. Throw it down.
I think we need to sand it to rough it up.
So if you have any questions, by all means, just shout them out, and I can try and answer them. If I can't get an answer, I'll tell Ted to find the answer. Now we find center again. This one here is going to be, this one's 58 millimeters. So that would be 29 center. Is that right? Oh no, this is, I'm looking at the wrong number. It's 62 millimeters. So that would be 31 millimeters to center. I thought something looked funny. That's probably why the other one turned out a little different than I was anticipating, because I wasn't using the marker properly. I've seen some people make these Femespheres with this center portion down to 1/8 of an inch, and they look great. But you got to remember, when you're turning this outside edge, there's a paper joint, and if it's only 1/8 of an inch thick, chances are it might not survive. So I make mine a little bit thicker because I like making them. I don't want them to fly apart. So again, we'll just go down and define the overall. I'm moving a little bit on the wild side here because I took the ends down to the final diameter. I might get lucky, I should be able to. If I don't have any serious scratches, it'll be fine. But if it comes apart, that's part of the demonstration. Sometimes it can happen. That's why it's really important to always wear a face shield. So you've probably seen I had a couple of catches on this one as well, so it ended up being a little bit smaller than than I originally started with. And I didn't use a template on this one. I just did it by eye just because. Now comes the proof in the pudding. Where I'll take a knife. And I brought a mallet with me. So you put the knife right on the paper joint, right on the paper. And it comes apart. And now the trick is you turn it 90 degrees. And you'll find out how close you came. Is that one I turned or passed around earlier? This one I used a template on, so we'll see whether or not using a template helps. And sometimes with the paper joint, you don't even have to use a mallet. If you got a sharp knife, it'll cut the paper. That looks like it wants to. You need a little bit more persuasion than I can do by hand. So it comes apart here, 90 degrees. Compare that to the one that I just did by eye. So now to finish these off, the turning portion of it is done. To finish them off, I just run them on a piece of sandpaper on here, put a piece of sandpaper on here and rub the paper off, turn them 90 degrees, and glue them. And then the next day, take them back and take a Japanese saw or whatever and cut these off so that they're in line with the top. And then I use a rotary sander and a drill. Use a little rotary sander and a drill, and you can drill it, put this in a drill press, and you can hold this up on the drill press and just sand these off and blend them in. And the closer you get when you're cutting the coves, the less sanding you have to do. But even on this one here, I've got like a 1/16 of an inch where I missed. If you blend for 5 or 10 minutes on one of these, nobody will ever know. So like I say, they're fun to make. These things are almost like popcorn. Once you've made one and were successful, it didn't fly apart, you can't stop at one. You have to make a whole bunch of blocks and just have them there. I go out in the shop and I'll have a half a dozen blocks like this set up. This is a perfect example of what can happen. This block, I thought I was going to turn this block, and it fell apart. But if you'll notice, I used this as a mallet, and I was pounding on my knife, and that was enough to cause this one to break the paper. Right, John? So this is the one I was using to talk about this, but I also used it as a mallet, and just pounding it broke the paper. So it's a strong joint as long as you don't pound on it on the point. Where's the other piece go?
Right in front of you. Come forward.
Oh, right there. It's the same color as the other sawdust. So again, I turned this one at home a couple of days ago, getting ready for this demo. So I used a couple of templates on it, and even then it still didn't come out perfect. Any questions?
How long do they take you now?
Pardon?
How long does it take you to do one?
When did I start? I made 2, and I've been here, what, an hour? Yeah. When I have a whole bunch of blocks like this set up and I'm in my shop, I'll probably spend 10 minutes
Per piece?
per piece to get to the point before you're ready to split it.
Right.
The very, very first ones I did probably took me a half hour to 45 minutes because I was being really anal and trying to make it perfect and whatever. And then you get comfortable with the movements and then using a template. So you put the template in, it shows you where you got to take material off. So that's the only place you take it off. And then you get comfortable with it. And the biggest thing I found was keeping this handle into your body. So I don't know if you noticed it when I was doing it. I'm swinging my body and I'm pivoting the tool on the tool rest. So it's just cutting like this, right? I'm not using my arms or anything. It's just, I'm turning it, like turning the tool open and closed so that I can get the cut once I'm riding the bevel, but I just pivot it. And then I pivot it again. And if you're pivoting, you get a nice arc. When you get a nice arc, then you can follow a nice arc like this. And so when I'm turning the outside arcs to start with, I'll do them like practice arcs to see how it's going to feel and see which one of these is going to be the one that I might use as I'm going deeper. And then every time I make 3 or 4 passes, I would check it just to see if my muscle memory is getting where it needs to be, and then do both sides. And then like this last one, I took the ends right down to the final thickness, and I was still successful. If you take it right down to the final thickness and you have a catch, very likely the paper joint will come apart like the other big one did. And it's not the end of the world if it comes apart. It's just understanding that it can happen. Wear a face shield, and if it happens, so what? Throw it away. It's wood. It grows on trees. And if you're to do this, and I wanted to use some really, really good practice wood for these, just get a 2x4. Get 2 2x4s. You don't even have to sand them. Just cut the lengths, just cut the blocks. 2x4 pine. Paper joint, glue it together. Cuts like butter, sands like crap. But it gets you the practice of doing the cove. And then you turn it and you find out how close they were. And the very, very first one that you get, it's going to be perfect. And it'll be like golf. It's like hitting a golf shot. You hit one that goes 350 yards perfectly straight down the fairway, and you spend the next 15 years trying to do it again. Another thing you can do on the ends is put a little block on here, John. Put a little block on here. So I drilled a hole in this little piece of wood, and I had a mark on the center, and I put my scratch awl on the center, and then I just used some super glue and glued this little piece of MDF on it. And then when you put it in here, the little MDF takes up that space so that your drive center doesn't split your wood, and yet your ring is still pushing in and giving you lots of drive and lots of support. So that's another thing you can do. If you're making your blocks, just cheap insurance, because now you've got a piece of wood that's glued on both halves. Kind of helps hold it together. It's super glue, so you hit it with a chisel, it'll fall off. I mean, it's pretty brittle. And yeah. Any other questions?
Correct, you say that like brown paper bag is the best paper to use?
That's what I use. I use brown paper bags, any craft paper. You can use newspaper. Some of the newspapers now are really, really thin. So if the glue soaks through the paper, then it'll glue the wood together. So I've used printer paper. Printer paper is a little thicker than paper bag, but I typically just use grocery bag. Just cut it up, I mean, that'll make a lot of these split prints.
Did you say that printed paper is okay to use?
Sorry?
Printed paper, did you say it's okay to use printed paper?
Newspaper is okay, but magazines that have glossy finish, the glue doesn't stick to it very well, so it'll come apart. So this stuff here has a bit of a rough texture that it'll soak up a little bit of glue, but you can see on the pieces that went around, the glue didn't soak through the paper. And if you use Type Bond 3, you have to sand it off. If you use Type Bond Translucent or Type Bond Original, you can just hit it with some water and it'll fall off because it's not waterproof. Or you can use school glue, Elmer's white school glue. It's not waterproof. It holds nice and strong, but if you don't want to sand the paper off, well, you just stick it in some water and just rub the paper off because the glue will come off. I usually use, I have Type Bond in my shop, so I use it all the time. So I just sand it off. I don't worry about a couple minutes with a block of sandpaper and gets rid of the paper and you glue it back together. So how many people are willing to try this?
Oh, are you giving me?
Who else wants one? So we'll bring it back in September. And even if it comes back in 2 pieces, if it comes apart, bring it back that way because that's part of the experience, right? And if it comes apart on me, then just make another blanket.
Try and roll, I don't understand how it rolls on the floor. Try and roll that again.
Where is that?
Maybe I'm just not smart, but
Or it doesn't roll.
it's almost, that's the problem.
Just roll it slowly, Bert. Try to roll it too fast, it won't work.
Yeah, so you set it on here. I don't know, John, can you, which camera looks at this? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter because we're... Okay, we'll try it here. So we'll... Come on. They call it like a drunken box. Huh?
It does work.
Yep. If it was perfectly round, if this one was perfect, then it would roll really, really nicely. But when I made these last year and gave them to a math teacher in Stony Plain, she took them to her students, and she's got a couple of students in her class that had attention deficit disorder or just whatever. They were always fidgeting. So she gave them one of these, and those kids were playing with it for the whole class. And so she loved it because it got them quiet. Everybody else was able to get some work done. And they are kind of tactile. I don't know. I like playing with them. I've got my grandkids like playing with them too. They just feel like fun. Eh?
Do we have time for a coffee?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Maybe grab a coffee and check out some of the stuff on the table. If you want to know more about it, just figure out who did it and check. So
Does everybody have a chance? Take a look and make sure you grab your name tag.